This is the Self-Employed Mum podcast, the raw, honest truths of what it takes to be a mum and an entrepreneur. Running a business while raising small humans is an entirely different ballgame, and if you, like me, are in the thick of it right now, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Rhiannon Loudon, mom of two, proud entrepreneur, and CEO of two small businesses. And my guests, women who are juggling all the plates, building businesses while raising the next generation. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, follow, and spread the word to help keep this podcast going. Now on to today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the Self-Employed Mum podcast. Today's guest is somebody I know very well. She is one of my closest friends. She is my virtual assistant and my designer, and somebody that I co-host Small Biz Big Chat networking events with as well. So it feels a little bit strange to have to introduce her formally, but hello, Emmelie. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So rather than me stumble through what you do, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with your business?
So I mainly am a brand designer and illustrator, and I work with female entrepreneurs who want their branding to be bold and vibrant and to stand out from their competitors.
Brilliant. And I know that your business has kind of morphed over the last few years as well. I know that you started out kind of in a different area and then really found your focus. So can you walk us through your business journey?
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a VA, as your VA to be exact. You were the first person to trust me with your business. And at the time, I was still working part-time in a employed role doing admin work. So that felt like a very natural progression. I felt comfortable and confident to be a VA for other small business owners. But after about a year, I think the creative itch started to get too big. And I really wanted to do more creative work. I've always been very creative, and in my employed role, that was something I was really missing. I got it a bit more in the VA business, but yeah, I just really wanted to do branding and illustrations. So since last year, that's kind of what I pivoted to. I still have two VA clients, but yeah, I do focus now on the branding and the design part.
And did you find it quite hard to sort of, I know you said you were doing a lot of sort of creative stuff as part of your VA role. And I know from my perspective, I'm rubbish at design stuff. So I know, I could send you photos and send you text and you could make everything look really nice for me. So I know you were doing some of that already, but did you find it quite hard to sort of shift your focus, or do you feel like that just happened organically as you were sharing kind of more and more of what you were doing?
I think it was hard at the start. I think it's always this confidence thing, or at least it has been for me with the creative stuff, and to find people that want to pay you for being creative. Because it's something that I love to do. It's then hard to turn that into a business model. But yeah, I think doing the creative work in my VA role, I did gain more confidence in that, and that kind of helped me to push to turn to brand design and illustrations.
That's really good, actually. I never thought about that because you can almost like test it out. And then when you see that people are really happy with it and they are willing to pay for it, and you realize, oh, yeah, this isn't something that everybody can do, and certainly not as well as you can. I think that makes it
maybe a little bit easier, because it is that hard thing. Like, that's the thing. I loved photography since I was a kid. I mean, I've got silly photos when my parents used to buy me those little like point and shoot cameras and get them developed of like snowmen that we made in the back garden, like, silly things like that. And I think it's still amazing to me some days that I somehow managed to turn that into a career. And there is that bit of, it's not guilt, because you know that you've spent a long time like learning your craft and building experience and upskilling and doing all of these things. But there is this bit of a weird thing when it comes to charging for something that you love to do, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think it's as well, it's the bit where it maybe it comes natural to you, or it's really easy for you. So it's like then making that switch that it's actually not easy for everyone, and
Yep.
then charging them for it.
No, but that's really cool. I like how you kind of found your focus organically. Like, you obviously already knew that you love that stuff, but then it really helped you kind of realize how much people have a need for it. And I think maybe that's the perfect segue into our topic for today, which is speaking about standing out online. And I know, we chatted about this before, because Emily and I obviously talk all the time and we don't want to keep referring back to, we've already talked about this loads, but I think it's something that has become a bit of a buzzword. So many people that work in anything to do with branding and marketing talk about standing out online. And yet a lot of people use a sort of cookie cutter approach to the service that they offer, which obviously is the opposite of helping people to stand out online. So thought it would be really interesting today to have a conversation about how you make something for each client, whether that's, from my perspective, the photography side of things, from your perspective, the sort of design and illustration. And I think both of us end up doing a fair bit of work on the strategic side of branding as well. So what are your sort of initial thoughts on that? On I hate the word bespoke. I really don't like it, but essentially we do provide quite a bespoke or customized service. So what are your kind of thoughts on this?
So yeah, I think everyone is unique, and I think that's another kind of buzzword that's going about, but it is very true. And I think that is where, or at least I often start with my clients, is to figure out who they are and why they are different from their competitors, to see then what of their personality relates to their ideal clients. So to then pick out those bits and turn them into visuals.
Which is not an easy task, really. I think a lot of people too really struggle to find what it is that makes them unique.
Yeah.
And I think, it's that whole like USP, like everybody knows that they need them, but a lot of people, and I don't know if you find the same with your clients, but when I have an initial chat with people, I'll ask them like, what are your USPs? What are the things that make you different? And a lot of people don't know. They're like, well, I do this, but other people do this. And they forget though that like they are the only them. There will be something about their process, their approach, their style, their experience, there are so many variants that make somebody unique. And I think that's, some people need to kind of be reminded that like they are almost their greatest superpower when it comes to standing out.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's not necessarily their service or their product that they need to look at, but maybe more like you said, like their personality or their hobbies, or something that, like, I had a client who was obsessed with the 90s, and like she was in kind of the tech business, and a lot of her competitors would be like showing the latest, newest trends and stuff in their branding, where she was like, no, I want to be, I love the 90s, I love punk pop, that's what I want to include in my branding. And I think that's where people need to look at maybe the experience that they give their clients when they work with them. Are they a very high energy, bubbly person? Like, how can we include that in their branding and in their visuals to show that that's who they are?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's easy to focus on the like, well, I do photography, so all I can show are photos that I've taken, like it's easy to get caught up in that. But I think you're right. And when I think about the way that I book somebody, and especially if it's a service-based business, I want to feel like they're relatable. I want to feel like they care about the stuff that I care about, like they'd be fun to go out for coffee or a drink with. Like,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
yeah, not that you need to be like best friends with everybody you work with, but it is that idea that people are more likely to choose you if they feel like you're like-minded. And so the more that you can show off like silly, quirky things, like, yeah, I love that. And I know what client you're speaking about because I remember seeing you share the branding that you did for them and thinking like, that's awesome. Like that totally draws me to them. And it also makes you, I think sometimes the thing that makes people worried about this is that they think it's going to be unprofessional. It's like, well, can I be that bold or can I be that sort of creative, especially in something like tech, which is like obviously a more rational sort of
Yeah.
field or industry. But as a small business, I think people sort of expect and almost appreciate when you're willing to be a little bit less, you're not going for corporate clients,
No,
presumably.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think like your personality is your biggest asset in your business and showing your business. So yeah, you should be wanting to show that to potential clients.
I totally agree. And I think the same goes for photography. Like I see a lot of brand photographers who talk about this idea of standing out and being unique. And then when they post photos, it's the same photo of somebody sitting at a white desk with a plain background and a single laptop sitting there smiling at the camera. And I think, okay, we maybe all have a photo of us with our laptop because, yeah, it's a part of what we do. But it's rather than reproducing those exact same poses and those exact same backdrops every time, like let's get some personality and let's see your workspace. Let's have some of the things that you love around. Let's dress you in something that you would actually wear when you go and meet with a client so that you look like you in your photos.
Yeah, that's so important.
And I think people forget that too, because so much of marketing, especially as a small business, and again, I'm focusing a bit more on service-based businesses here, but I want my clients to get a feel for what it would be like to work with me before they even book me. Like, I want people to kind of go, all right, so if I go ahead with her, she's going to be quite relaxed about it and really kind of honest, and the chat's going to be good. And I don't, if somebody's wanting like a really overly kind of serious, right, let's sit down and get this done kind of person, I'm not the person for them. So I'm okay with showing who I am if that puts those people off because they're not my ideal clients anyway.
No, exactly. And I think you should start like that starts with your branding, because that's the first thing that people see most of the time.
So going back to the kind of starting with the branding, and I think you'll probably have similar clients to myself, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll either get people that are in like the startup phase of a new business, maybe the rebrand phase where they've been doing stuff for a while, but they maybe did their initial branding themselves or their business has changed and it doesn't suit them anymore, or somebody who's maybe in a growth phase that's ready to like really hone in on their branding and their marketing. So, what would you say when people get in touch at first? What are the kind of key things that they're struggling with or worried about? Like, what are the kind of core problems that people come to you with?
I think either they don't have many ideas of what their branding should look like. So they need some input from me to figure out what it is that they want to show, either from their personality or how like what their brand visuals should include. Or the complete opposite, where they have all the ideas and they just can't decide on what to choose to use for their branding, and they just get themselves so confused, and it seems like this massive big pile that they need to sort through to figure out how to put their branding together.
That's quite interesting because I always think as your job is very much like, obviously you're doing a lot of creative stuff, but I always think of it as like you sit down and you just get going with this idea and you get the visuals done. But I guess a lot of it is actually your sort of initial like conversations back and forth with people, trying to figure out what they're about and what their business is about and who they want to reach, and then figuring out how to kind of tie that all together into a brand design.
Yeah. I definitely don't design in a way where I, talk to you for 5 minutes and then go away and design something that is on trend, or, you gave me 2 or 3 images that you like and I designed something from that. I am very much a strategic brand designer. I like to understand your business. I like to know as well where you want to go, like what you want to do in 3-5 years time, so that your branding is still relevant for you growing your business. And I think I've heard it referred to as like the magpie syndrome, where you might look at a lot of images that you really like, but there's not really any thought behind it. Like you find the images and you go like, oh, this is what I really like, so I'm going to add that to my branding, like maybe a font or a color palette, where I really like to look at all the visuals and go like, why is this font working for your brand? Or, picking the right colors that make you feel the right things, or your ideal clients make you feel the things that you want them to feel, instead of just going with, this month I'm liking blue, so that's what I'm adding to my branding. And then in 6 months time, you probably turn around and go like, oh, my branding isn't doing it for me anymore, and you want to change it up again. So yeah, that's kind of my thought behind my design process.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny because when I started doing brand photography, like coming from a sort of like communications background, I obviously understood that so much about your visuals is really messaging. It's visual instead of words. But I didn't realize how much strategy actually has to be sort of figured out before the photography. And that's how I ended up offering brand strategy in as a service, because I would sit down with people and we'd, as you say, it's not a 5-minute conversation. It's like a proper, let's talk about your business. Where are things? Where do you want them to go? Who are your ideal clients? What's your brand voice? And I'd be asking these questions, and a lot of people just didn't know. And I'm not putting anybody down. Most of us, when you start a business, you're good at what you do or what you make, but you've never ran a business before. Like, I don't have a business degree, so a lot of it was learning as I went. So I think a lot of people maybe just haven't actually sat down and figured this stuff out. And so I think for you as well, like a big part of our job, whether they book me for a separate strategy session or not, but a big part of the job is sitting down and chatting all of that through ahead of time. Because if you don't sort of have that stuff laid out in front of you, anything that you're doing is, like you say, it's just like, oh, I like that, but it's not actually helping you work towards those next goals or to getting your messaging right or reaching the right people.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how much strategy plays into a creative job, isn't it?
It does. I mean, yeah, you can do it without it, but like I said, I think then the designs that come out of it aren't doing the job that the branding should be doing. It should be attracting the right clients to you. It should be speaking to them. But it should also make you feel confident and happy. And if you pay a designer a big sum of money and after 6 months you go like, oh, actually I don't like this anymore, I need something new, then that's not worth your money.
Yeah. And do you know what? Speaking of that, just while we're on this subject, can you walk us through? Because I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there, similar to brand photography. People are like, oh, it's just headshots. It's not, it's way more than that. So, from your perspective and your side of things on this sort of brand design, and I know obviously you do the illustration as well, can you walk us through, like, if I book you for a brand design, what does that include? Because I know it's not just a logo.
I was just going to say, like, the amount of times that I've spoken to people and they go like, oh, but I just need a logo. Yeah, so my medium package that I offer includes obviously a logo, because you do need that. And then it has sub marks, which are basically secondary logos. So you take your main logo and you either take elements of it or you shorten it so it fits in like other areas where maybe your main logo wouldn't fit. Like if you need a round logo or you need just a small icon, things like that would come under the sub brands or the sub marks. A color palette, obviously. And I like to design very bright and colorful ones. And a font suite. So you're using the same fonts that are also linked to, you know, your brand values or what you want your branding to portray. And then so I think that's kind of the basics that you really need for your branding. So if any of those you haven't really thought of, yeah, maybe have a think about them. And then I also offer some graphic illustrations or icons or some patterns, and a social media suite. So it's easy to launch your new branding and you don't have to, you know, faff about in Canva for hours trying to add all your new elements and colors and things, but it's all done for you.
I have to say that's made such a difference for me. Like, see if I know that maybe I'm having a content creation day, or maybe I'm like, oh crap, I haven't posted yet this week, I better get something up. If I can just go into Canva and have templates that are in my brand colors, my brand fonts, everything's there, and all I'm doing is changing the wording or popping a photo in or whatever, that makes such a big difference. And the other thing with that too is, like, as well as saving you time as the business owner, and like we all need more time. I'm sure we're all in the same boat where we're trying to cram way too much into way too limited hours. And I think the other thing though is the consistency. So when I see really good branding, you do start to identify, like sometimes I'll see a post in my, say, Instagram feed, and I'll instantly know whose post it is without even looking at the name, because they've got either, like you say, it's like a submark that they always use, or a color palette, or a font that I'm like, oh yeah, that's Emily's. Like I can tell right away. And I think in terms of like brand recognition, and again, this idea of like standing out and being recognizable, it does make you really stand out. And it also makes you look that bit more professional, where I'm like, oh, that person obviously believes in their business enough to invest in it, rather than like, as you say, like, oh, I like blue this month and they're a different color all the time, or they're, you know, fooling around with fonts, or they don't have a logo, or all of their photos are selfies that they took on their phone. Like, it does just make you take that business a bit more seriously when you know that they've invested that resource into their branding.
Yeah, or even the time to you know, add their branding onto everything that they are putting out for their business. Yeah, and it, like you said, it does make them more professional. So that then has the effect that you're probably likely, or you would like, I'm going to say this, you can cut that bit out. It's more likely that you then spend more money with them.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is that way of, now, I'm not saying I would never book a business who doesn't have professional branding or doesn't have professional brand photos, but it does make you take them that bit more seriously, almost, where you're like, this person's obviously serious about their business because they are willing to invest in it. And like you said, it's not just a money thing, but it's like time and energy. And also I can see then that they've put thought into their brand. And it hasn't just been like on a whim, like, oh, I like pink this month because the Barbie movie came out. Like,
No, exactly. Like there is a bit of thought behind what they're doing. And yeah, like you said, it makes that they are taking their business serious. So it's easier than for you to invest in them as well, because you know that they're not next month going to decide to offer different services or stop with their business, or, yeah.
So I think maybe what might be kind of interesting is if we turn the tables now. So we've talked about the way that sort of brand design and branding can help you stand out and be unique online. We'll use those buzzwords. So let's talk about ourselves then, our own experience with our branding. So how did you, I guess, find your niche? How did you figure out not only who it is that you like to work with, but also the kind of work that you love to do?
Oh, difficult question.
Putting you on the spot a bit with that. Well, think about sort of your ideal clients first, because I think that does happen organically.
I think what a lot of people or strategists think, like, talk about is like this avatar that you need to create. And I think that's where I started off. And it was like, oh, this is the ideal person. She like makes this much money. She shops here. She, these are her hobbies. But after a while, I kind of went away from that. And through a mentoring program that I'm doing, really started to look more at like the traits that people have that would be my ideal clients. So I would find like actual businesses that I would love to work with and try to figure out like what the similarities are, like what makes them the same and why would they then be my ideal clients. So yeah, a couple of things from that for me are people that don't take themselves too seriously. People that love like standing out and having, a bold and vibrant color palette. They're kind of small to medium-sized businesses, often with female founders that perhaps are mums, which obviously, I can relate to as well. So yeah, I think just picking bits out from there and then trying to figure out what they are struggling with, why they would want to come and work with me. Yeah, I think, but the main thing for me was to kind of look at the similarities in traits that they have.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That is always how you start off with this like client avatar thing where you're like, right, they're here, they shop here, they live here, yeah. And I think that is a good starting point because it's an exercise that at least gets you kind of thinking about who these people are. And I think if you've been in business a while and it's been a while since you did it, it's kind of an interesting exercise to do again, because I don't know about you, but at the beginning I was kind of like, well, anybody could be my client, anybody who runs a business or anybody. And then over time you realize like who you work well with and which projects you've been the most excited about and which ones did you feel like you really nailed and like, the clients were the most happy with the work. And I don't know, you do kind of figure it out. And I think probably our ideal clients are very similar in that, I pretty much exclusively now just work with female founders, most of whom, not all of whom, are mums, but often even if they're not mums, they're carers, whether it's for a parent or, so I feel like there's always that aspect of it. And I also really like to work with people who are honest. I'm not keen to work with people who only show like the overly polished stuff. I like to work with people who are real and open. And, I think you do just figure it out organically over time. And, if I'm being honest, I have learned the hard way a few times working with clients who I maybe got a bit of a funny feeling off of, or I maybe wasn't quite sure where the right fit at the beginning, but I decided to go ahead anyway. And then it ended up being a really stressful experience, or it just, I think in the end, trusting your gut as to whether or not somebody is right to work with, and also having the confidence to say, I don't think I'm the right photographer for you, or I don't think I'm the right designer for you. And I think that stuff can only come with time. Like you just need to kind of learn as you go.
Yeah. definitely.
So
Sorry, I think, 1 second, I think I don't know if it's your internet or my internet, but I just...
yeah, I see that too. Mine looks okay. However, I don't usually do calls in this room, so I'm not 100% sure. It's still
I've got
recording,
like a
okay.
booster thing and everything, but I don't know. Oh,
It seems okay now.
Seems to be stabilized again.
Yeah, it's fine. The video freezes
Right.
a bit, but the sound seems okay.
What we're gonna have.
Okay, just give it a sec to so that I think makes sense from the ideal client side of things. And I think that can change as well. Like it might change over time as you sort of develop your products or services. You might find that actually you're gearing yourself towards a little bit of a different audience, and that's fine. I think it's just important to kind of revisit that even if you do it like once a year in January when things are quiet and you're like, right, okay, like where do I actually want this to go this year? Are my ideal clients still my ideal clients? Is my target audience still the same? That kind of thing. But now I'm curious.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. But now I'm curious to kind of chat from the other side of things. So how did you figure out your style and your sort of niche in terms of like how you provide your service? How did that come about?
So when I started off as a VA, I obviously did my own branding, being a creative person. And I did, look at other VAs and seeing what they were doing, and there was a lot of pink. So my first instinct was like, I don't want to just be pink and grey. So I picked a couple of colors that I did like. I didn't do my own strategy thing at the start, but I did make the decision to be different from other VEs. But I always I muted the colors down a bit because obviously I didn't want to be too standoutish. This thing, and I've spoken about this on my Instagram recently, where I think we have this, especially if you've grown up, I think in the 90s, where you've always been told to kind of tone it down or to, don't be too much. So yeah, there's always been this thing in me that, oh, I love this color, I love this print, or these clothes, but yeah, that's a bit too much. I'm not comfortable wearing that. And I think the same went for my branding. I just toned it down a bit to not be too much and to not be too standoutish. But after I think about a year, I decided to change that up and went with the color palette that I have now, which obviously is a lot more out there and very bright. But it also is something that I know gives me joy. So I'm hoping that it gives my audience joy when they find it, when they see it, when they scroll past me on Instagram and go like, oh yeah, that's a lovely, bright and colorful post. So yeah, I think that's kind of how that evolved, and just getting more comfortable with standing out and actually going, no, this is me, and I'm not afraid to share that with people. I did a post recently where I was talking about an outfit that I was picking for networking, and in my head I had this outfit and I was like, oh no, it's going to be too much, it's going to be too bright. But I put it on and I felt so comfortable and confident in it that I decided to wear it, and then I got so many compliments afterwards on my outfit. And yeah, I think that often applies to people's branding as well. They might go like, oh, I would really love for my branding to be this colorful or this bold, but it might be a bit too much. I might be a bit too different, or and then they tone it down and then you're not standing out anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, I know I'm supposed to stand out online, but how many people actually have the guts to do it and to just be who they are? And it is kind of like, it is like being vulnerable in a way, like, obviously from this sort of I guess, written content that you share as well, like being willing to talk about the tough stuff or show the messy house or the real life behind the scenes. That's all hard, but actually sometimes just showing up as who you are and your branding is tough too. And it is taking that step of sort of confidence to be exactly what you said, like, no, this is who I am, and if people don't like it, that's fine, like they're not who I want to work with. And I think what's interesting for you is, like, when I think of you and what it's like to work with you, like, you are a person who's like bright and warm and bubbly, and every time I see you, you are wearing something colorful. So if you had really drab, like, yeah, like gray branding, I'd be like, what, like, who, this doesn't match at all. And I think that's the thing, whether it's your branding or it's the same with photos. Like, if I see really serious kind of boring backdrop photos of someone and then I meet them in real life and they're like super friendly and vibrant and extroverted, there's a huge disconnect. Whereas, you know, knowing you and knowing your branding, they match, like that fits to me, and it instantly adds another level of trust, because I'm like, oh, she's willing to show the real her.
Yeah, and I think two things that I wanted to touch on there is that I think it's trying to figure out who, like, what part of you is that bold, like, vibrant personality, I guess. Because, you know, I am an introvert, so I'm not always this like high energy, out there, shouty person. But like you said, I do like to wear the bold colors. I'm not someone who has different colored hair. But yeah, so for me, it's really relating to wearing bright colors and maybe wearing things that are a bit different. And that's where I think my personality like matches my branding. And the other thing what I wanted to say about that was that I think before I added the bold branding to my brand, I wanted to wear colorful things, but they were also always a bit more muted, and, you know, or I would go for the dark blues, or, you know, it wasn't nearly as colorful as it is now. So I think my branding has also really helped me to figure out, like, no, actually, this is who I am, and I am going to wear the bright colors. And it, to be honest, has quite dramatically stopped me from buying a lot of dull clothes. So whenever I'm looking at clothes now, it's like, is this bright enough? And if it's not, I'm just not buying it. So yeah, I think it has really helped me to come out of my shell as well.
That's so cool. I never thought about it that way, but it is funny. Like, I think I was always quite a rebellious person, like, and not just in my teenage years. I think I was always like, I don't want to go with the status quo. But for a long time, I was definitely the same about, like, in that I was a bit too afraid to show it. And I always wanted to like dye my hair crazy colors and have more tattoos than I did and wear things that are different. And I don't know, it took me until my like late 20s, early 30s before I sort of had the confidence to just be like, this is what I like. This is what I'm going to wear. This is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to change my hair color every few months, and I'm, you know, I'm going to get a sleeve tattooed on my arm because I've always wanted it. And yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how much of that does come from like putting a bit of yourself out there and then going, oh yeah, this helps me find my people. And then the more you do it, the easier it gets, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I've had, you know, a similar experience too, but I didn't really think about it that way until you said it. But it is true. It's like I kind of maybe dip my toes in the water a bit. And I think it's the same in terms of sharing content about the tough stuff. At the beginning, I was like, oh, well, if I show what's hard, or I show what hasn't worked, or I show like the chaos of my life, people aren't going to want to work with me. And you know what? It probably has put some people off. Like, there are people who only want to see uber professional, sort of perfect feed, you know, social media feed and whatever else. But those aren't the kind of people I want to work with anyways. And since I started showing more of the real me and not only the overly polished stuff, and talking not just about the highlights, but the things that haven't worked, my business has like doubled. Like, you know, it's that dramatic. And I really think that a huge part of that is the sort of, again, I hate the buzzword, but like the authenticity of showing both sides of the story.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does make you more relatable, especially if you're working with other small businesses, who are probably going through the same thing, and they just go like, oh, it's not just me. This person gets me.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing about running a small business sometimes, is that it's difficult to find people who can truly relate to your experience if you don't have a circle around you who are also self-employed. I had a call with somebody yesterday who had just come across me. It wasn't really a business call, it was just a chat, and she was saying, like, this is me finally taking the leap with my business full time. And she was saying how she'd found it really hard because coming from a more corporate job, most of her friends had more corporate jobs, and she didn't really feel like she had anybody to speak to who had this experience of starting and growing a small business. And I don't know, like, I don't enjoy social media when it is all just glossy photos of people's perfect lives and like, oh, I have 50K months and I work on the beach in Hawaii with my laptop. Like, I'm so not into that. I definitely want people to share their highlights. I want to be able to celebrate with them, but I also want to see, like, well, you can't actually see the mess, but like, I've got a desk set up in my bedroom because we don't have a spare room for an office in the house, and just things like that, that are a little bit more real life and relatable. And those are the kind of people I want to work with. So if it puts someone off that I don't have a big fancy schmancy office, then they're not my person anyway.
No, exactly. And I think that, like, showing those things, does make you relatable and does make connecting with someone a lot easier.
So we haven't actually, speaking of showing the real life, we haven't actually talked much about the motherhood aspect of our lives. So I thought, now that we've kind of got the business stuff, we've gone through a lot about branding, maybe let's talk a little bit about running our businesses as mothers of young children, and sort of how's that going for you? Well, maybe let us know the ages of your kids and sort of how you're managing to juggle both things just now.
So yeah, I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And yeah, like you said, it's been a juggle, to say the least. To go back to the start, this is something we talk a lot about. Just the frustration that it sometimes causes when you've got your week all planned out and then the nursery phones first thing on Monday morning when you're ready to get started, to say that your child has something and they have to be off for a couple of days or a week. And then being the self-employed mom, you're the one that has to rejig your plans, because similar to you, my husband is employed. So it's a lot harder for him to say, oh, I'm taking a day off, or I'll work this evening, or I'll work the weekend. So yeah, it comes down to me to figure it all out.
Yeah, I think this is the curse of having a flexible job. Like, obviously, having a flexible job is great in that you can plan your job more around your kids. But on the flip side of that is you're sort of expected to be the one to drop everything because your job is flexible. And the thing is, like, similar position, Paul works 8 to 5 or whatever, and he's kind of expected to be working during those hours. And all of a sudden, if one of the kids is sick or the school calls and the older one needs picked up, or you do end up having to rejig your day. And I think part of being really honest about all aspects of your life and being really open about that is people know that you have children. And often, I think our clients also have children, so they know what it's like and they're really understanding. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel really like, oh my God, I have to reschedule another meeting. Or it is very, very difficult to plan out your weeks when you are the parent of small children.
Yeah, definitely. And then we haven't even spoken about the school holidays. It's my husband, I doubt he even knows when the school holidays are. But I have to plan my work around it and take on a bit less. That's what I'm trying to do anyway, like take on less when they're school holidays, so I'm not as stressed out about work needing to be done in the evenings, and I can just relax and spend kids and not feel, I should be sitting at my desk or I should be doing things. I can completely switch off and focus on them.
Yeah, because otherwise there's this, and I think this is what I struggle with a lot, is the whole mum guilt thing. I mean, I don't think you can be a
Don't we
mum
all?
and not have mum guilt, but it just kind of feels like something's got to give. So like if I'm really on the ball with work and I'm really excited about something I'm working on and I'm putting in extra time, then I feel guilty because I've probably taken that time away from the kids. And, vice versa. If I've spent loads of time with the kids and I'm really enjoying family time, and then I'm sitting there going, oh man, I've not done any of these extra things for my business. I really need to get back on the marketing. Like, it's like you can't win. You're always trying to juggle all of these things. And I don't know, at the beginning I was like, oh, I'll figure out the perfect work-life balance. And I don't think there is a perfect work-life balance. I think you just keep rejigging it.
Yeah, I think you obviously want to spend time with your kids, and that for me, that's one of the reasons that I started my own business, is that I wanted to be there for them, especially now that my eldest is going to school. I'm so grateful that I can be there every day at the school gates to pick him up. And I don't have to rush home because I'm still working, like a lot of other parents do. Like he can play in the park for as long as he wants. We don't have this like, oh, we need to rush home because I need to get back to my desk. And I think as well to realize that you might not grow your business as fast as other people, or I think this is this whole comparison thing where trying to step away from that, that because we don't have as many hours in the week to work on our business because we're also caring for our children, means that go a bit slower than you probably would like. So yeah, I think those are two things that I'm trying to keep in mind when the mum guilt plays up, or the business guilt, I guess.
I think that's one of the things that I've found the hardest, because I am so excited about my business, and you're quite good at reining me in often when I'm like, I've got this new idea, and like I've always got new ideas and I've always got things that I want to do. And probably most people are the same. You're running a business that's your dream and you're excited about it. And it is hard sometimes to go like, right now is not the time to start introducing something new, or now is not the time to take that opportunity because I am already stretched quite thin. But it is hard. And I know we all know not to play the comparison game, but we're human and that's what we do. It is really hard to see other people that maybe don't have children or who have older children and are able to kind of just give it their all, and who do have a lot more working hours and don't have the same demands as we currently do with the children, the ages of our children. It is hard to see them doing all of the things and not think like, I want to be like that. But you're right, there will be time for that, and it is sort of accepting that everybody goes at their own pace, and my pace might be a bit slower than I want right now, but at some point that'll catch up and somebody else will be parenting really small children or having these additional constraints on their time. So yeah, that's a good one to bring up.
Yeah, it's something that I think, I mean, it's hard because you do sometimes, like you said, if you're really passionate or excited about something, you just want to like put all your energy and time into it, and just realizing, well, that's not the case. But then yeah, there is the good things that you do have the freedom to spend the time with the kids, and instead of pushing your business forward.
Yeah, and another thing that I've really found to be, I guess, a pro to the whole flexibility of self-employed life is being able to sort of plan a little bit, to some extent anyway, around like, some people are really affected hormonally at different times of the month, or maybe there's something going on in your life and you've got a bunch of tough appointments one week or whatever. And having a little bit of flexibility, as long as you have enough notice about these things to sort of plan around that, where in a normal job you probably wouldn't be able to do that. So there are
No.
definitely lots of pros, and you're right, it's not all challenging stuff, but I think there are a lot of added challenges when you run a business with small kids, and it is what it is. It feels really unfair sometimes, or it feels like people don't get it sometimes, but I think you kind of just figure it out as you go. And I don't
Yeah.
know, I think we've maybe talked some of it through already, but has there been anything that you found has really helped you in terms of like the juggle side of it? Like, is there anything that you found helped you sort of find a better balance or figure out like the right amount of workload, or any kind of tips or advice you could share?
I think talking about the workload, I do try to not plan out or cram in every working hour of the week with client work or like my own marketing and business stuff that needs to be done. I do try to keep a bit more time. Like I build in sorry. I build in some kind of buffer time into, if I book projects in, I know that I add in more time that I probably need, so that if something comes up where I do have to take care of one of the kids because they're sick, or there's a holiday, or other things that are maybe unforeseen, that I'm not then working like every evening till midnight to get the deadline to to do the work before the deadline, and stressing out, that I can just go like, oh, okay, today has completely fallen in the water, but tomorrow I still have like X amount of hours to work on this. So yeah, I think that's something that has really helped me. Also when like I'm sick, that I don't feel like I have to work, but I do have a bit of leeway to, maybe I do 1 or 2 hours, but then I have the rest of the day to just, or at least the school day, to relax. Because as soon as the kids are home, like, we can't be sick as mums, can we?
Definitely not.
And then I'm trying to think what else has yeah, and I think I learned the hard way, like things that are predictable, like the school holidays, to not take on work during those times. That has been something that I learned the hard way, that I took on too much work, and then I was stressing about getting the work done and working the weekends and working the evenings after spending a long day with the kids was not ideal.
It is hard though, because of course, like hindsight's 2020, and you can look back and go, oh, I shouldn't have taken on that much. But on the other side of that, sometimes an opportunity comes in that you're really excited about. And even if you know that it means that you're going to have to do that work in the evenings and on the weekends, and you are going to feel tired and you are going to be stretched thin, sometimes the opportunity is worth it. And I think, again, that the joy of being self-employed is you get to pick what opportunities are worth it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, then I think if it is an exciting opportunity, and if it does something good for your business, then that is really good. But like you said, then that's your decision to make. Like, you can decide if it is worth it for you to work in the evenings and the weekends, and to maybe be a bit stressed out about it.
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny, like I have a friend, Denise, who she's a sort of marketing specialist, marketing consultant. And I had this conversation with her like a couple of years back, saying, I think we had planned a holiday or a week off or something. And I was saying, oh, during that week, I just really felt like creating some content. I felt like writing and whatever. So I ended up doing it, and then feeling guilty that I was working on my holidays. And she's German and she's quite blunt. And she just kind of looked at me and went, but you're allowed to do what you want. It's your holiday time. Like, why would you feel guilty for choosing to do something you want to do, whether or not you're on holidays? And
Yeah.
that's kind of always stuck with me. And that's the way I look at it now. Like, I tend to work a lot of nights when the kids go to bed. And I know some people don't want to do that and hate that, but I am a night owl. And if I'm being honest, that is when I feel creative. That is when I like thinking about strategic things like my content strategy, or I do a lot of my writing at night, or a lot of my editing, because that is a time where I feel quite creative. I'll sit with like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, or, you know, maybe a nice glass of wine, depending on how I'm feeling. And I'll sit and just do something creative. And that's, you know, I'm not feeling guilty about that anymore, because that's my choice. Maybe, you know, today I went to the gym all morning, so that means I probably will work tonight, but again, I've made the choice to do that.
And that is, I guess, the beauty of being your own boss, and, you know, doing those things when you want them, and not feeling guilty about it.
See, and now we're ending on a positive note. We've talked about some of the tough stuff. We've not avoided the kind of hard, honest truths, but yeah, we're ending on the kind of positive note of, you know, some of the good things about the flexibility of self-employment, especially.
Oh yeah, I love it. I wouldn't give it up, to be honest.
Neither would I. Even on the days when I'm really frustrated and complaining about it, I still would not trade it.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to say on the subject of branding or motherhood, or anything that we've missed?
No, I can't really. I think we spoke a lot about a lot of stuff. So yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of it.
Well, thanks for sharing your brilliant perspective on business ownership and motherhood, and, you know, on the brand design side of things as well. Can you let everybody know where to find you online?
Yes, and this is where the decision of using my own name is maybe a bit of a downfall. So they can go to my website, which is emmelicoulson.co.uk. But Emmelie is spelled a bit differently, so it's Emmelie. And the same for Instagram, it's emmelicoulson.design.
That's perfect. Well, I'll put the links in the show notes anyways, and obviously tag you and things on social. So it'll be easy enough to find you there. But thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of that with us, and for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to chat all things branding and motherhood with you.